Assessments. I'm going to cover now how to conduct a risk assessment. You need to understand, though, first that a risk assessment is probably the most fundamental useful tool that a virtual CISO has. It's a fundamental process for any organization that's offering virtual CISO services because it helps identify, evaluate, and then most importantly, prioritize information security risks to align those risks and strategies with the business goals and, of course, with compliance requirements. So a few of the key benefits that you want to keep in mind as we're discussing this is proactive threat mitigation. What I mean by that is that you want to try to identify threats before they happen. Alignment with compliance. You're most likely working with an organization that has one or more compliance requirements, such as GDPR or HIPAA, those sorts of things. Resource optimization. You can't address every single risk. You have to prioritize. It's one of the biggest benefits of doing a risk assessment, and this helps you get there. Obviously, it helps with business continuity too, because if you're able to reduce the likelihood that a threat will be realized, in other words, reduce the impact of the risk, then you're going to reduce the potential impact of business operations. And then finally, in today's environment, there's such a push to make sure that you can demonstrate that your company is secure as possible, you're following best practices, and this helps to get you there. So what are some of the core steps involved with a risk assessment? Well, you can't assess what you don't know about, so you have to identify your assets and your data. Data is an asset in itself. Then once you've identified that, then you can start to assess the threats and the vulnerabilities to each of those assets. So that includes external and internal risks, and also gaps with regards to compliance. You want to analyze the business impact as well, too, because as we said, this could really affect business continuity, which in turn would affect finances, operations, and reputation. Prioritize the risks because you can't make everything a priority. You have to work on it based on the severity of the risk. And what I mean by working on it, you develop mitigation strategies. And then afterwards, you want to have a continuous monitoring and review to make sure that the strategies that you put in place actually help to mitigate the risk. So a well-executed risk assessment strengthens the client security posture and really helps to differentiate the virtual CISO services, because you want to make sure that your virtual CISO services are risk-based. Now, there are many different ways to conduct a risk assessment, but there's really some commonality to it. First of all, you have to understand the business. If you're evaluating information security risks in a vacuum, then you're not really truly evaluating risks, not in the way that needs to be done for the business. Remember, this is a business process. So as I said before, you need to identify the key assets, the data included, so systems and all of that that's critical to the processes that keep this business working. Obviously, you have to identify the business too, because the risk involved is directly related to the business goals and the business operations. Same thing with regulatory requirements. You have to ensure that those match as well. Identify the threats and vulnerabilities. So you could have cybersecurity threats. You could have natural weather events such as hurricanes, or where I'm at, tornadoes are a particular issue, and also human errors. That can be a big threat right there. Look at the vulnerabilities. Unpatched software, weak passwords, or lack of security awareness are just 3 examples of potential vulnerabilities. And how do you find all this out? Well, you can't just magically have the information appear. You got to talk to people. I've found that going to the subject matter experts, such as the IT staff or the stakeholders in the business units, are the best way to do that. You want to make sure that you review some documentation of past audits, past assessments, past tests like vulnerability assessments. That includes also the any automated tools that might be in place for vulnerability scanning. You always want to have a current vulnerability scan just to help assess the cyber risks of your infrastructure. But now the next step really is all about prioritization, and you need to understand and assess the severity of the risks. We talk about risks are usually ranked a product of impact and likelihood. So impact would be financial hit, reputational risk, operational damage. The likelihood is just simply, well, what's the chance of it occurring? You could have a risk that has a high impact, like almost a business-ending event. But if the likelihood of it happening, let's just say, okay, a meteor strike. Well, if a meteor strikes your headquarters, you're probably going to have a business-ending event there. The chances of it happening, not significant. So you can have a high impact, but a very low, which then in turn makes it a low risk. You need to then track this in some way. And traditionally, the best way to do this is to create a risk register. This is can be as simple as a spreadsheet, which its purpose is just simply to track the risks, both the inherent and the residual. We'll talk about that in a moment, the treatment strategies and action items, because the goal here is that you want to align your risk management and your prioritization with the organization's risk appetite. Some organizations are more risk adverse than others. Now, your outcome here is really you want to make sure that you can present the risk in such a manner so that the C-suite and the board of directors can make risk-informed decisions, and that those decisions are data-driven and also help minimize business disruption.